When you try to use a variable in your program, there is a certain steps you have to follow before using that variable, and these steps sometimes called declaration of variable. So before using a variable, before to use a variable, you have to declare a variable. What is the meaning of declaration? Declaration means you have a data types, means what kind of data you want to store in that variable, and the identifier means the name of the variables. So these two things you must need before using that variable. So the data types and identifier is important. So this kind of variable declaration tells a computer that what kind of value this identifier here, this identifier can store, that can be identified by this data type. What is the name of the variable, that is can be identified by this identifier. And if initially if you have given a value, then the initial value of that identifier. If not, then an unknown value is assigned, and that is called the garbage value. So this is called declaration. Declaration is sometimes also called definition, but definition and declaration is not same. This is a statement in a programming language like extern int a. This a is the identifier, int is the data type, okay, and this extern tells that this variable declaration is a declaration type statement, okay, where you declare a statement a, you declare a variable a for your program. So there is another way that, as I said, the definition sometimes it is also same as declaration. Here the variable gets stored. When you define a variable, that time you have to define a value. For example, you don't know how you can define or what is the exact definition of a. If you give a value to that, the initialization operation is present, then that can be possible that a is equal to, say for example, 4 or 5 or 6. Then you can say that the value in that variable is 4, and the 4 is an integer type variable or a decimal variable or a float variable, like this way. Okay, sometimes declaration and definition variable done at the same time, like this. If you have a statement like this, that means a is created in the memory and a value has been assigned, a random value has been assigned to this. But in this case, no random value has been assigned to this. Just a variable name a has been created, but it is not pointed to any memory location. That is called declaration, just declared, okay, not defined. But here, this statement, just if you delete this keyword, this word extern, then this statement gives you or identify a specific memory location in your computer memory, and the value inside that is the definition of that variable. So that means you can define and declare a variable at the same time, like by using this statement. If you just want to declare a variable, then you can use this statement, and this is for a specific application. For different programming language, different types of this kind of words or different types of statement are used for declaring and defining a variable. Now, initializing a variable, if you want to give a value in that variable, then that is called initializing variable with a particular value. That value may change. Say for example, if you want to add a value with a plus 2, that means if the value of a is 4 and then you want to increase by 2 and want to store at the same time in a, that is also possible in programming, in computer programs, and that time the value of a gets changed, and that's called that means the initial value is not fixed, that can change during the execution of the program. When you are initializing a variable, that time you need a data type like this, okay, you need an identifier like this, you need an assignment operator, that means by which you can say that, okay, assign this value to this, and the corresponding value which you want to store. Or you don't need the data type, just the identifier, assignment operator, and value is used. For example, this, where you have a data type, the identifier, the assignment operator, and the value. Okay, and if you have already written this statement earlier, then you just write the identifier, the assignment operator, and the value of it which you want to initialize. So this way you can also initialize a variable. There is an example of variables of two types. One is like a number, another one is like character. Okay, so basically two types, and then you have different subtypes within this number and string. Now in number you have integer, float, double. In case of string you have character, string. If you declare a variable and do not initialize it, the variable contains an unknown value until it is assigned a value, and the variable's unknown value is called garbage value for that variable. It uses a default value for some variable. This point means, say for example, in the last example here, it does not mean that in all programming languages this value of a at the beginning will be a garbage value. No, some program says that if you don't initialize a variable with a particular value, then it will have a fixed value. By default, that value will be initialized by the compiler of that program, and that value is maybe 0 or maybe 1. Usually it is a 0. If you don't initialize a value to a variable, then by default it is a 0 value in that variables.